Hello, my name is Erin Holt and welcome to Carve Your Own Stamps. So we're going to start out by looking at some samples here. This is an example of a commercially made stamp. We have a wooden backing, a particle board sort of interleafing layer, and that red layer is our rubber or our linoleum. And I wanted to bring this out as a reference because in a moment I'm going to show you a couple of finished sample stamps that I worked on as I was preparing for this program. And you can see it's constructed very similarly. We have this backing of cork and it's stuck to this blue linoleum. And we're going to go through and learn how to work with these materials to make stamps of our own. So the blue layer is linoleum and the bottom layer is cork. And I bought these two materials separately, but the cork tiles are cool because they're self-adhesive. So I was able to stick that to the back of our linoleum and then I cut them together into these 2 by 3 inch blocks. Now, the first thing I'm going to show you is how I design a stamp. And the first thing I need to do is make sure that I can get the proportions correct. So I flip over my block, which in this case is this 2 inch by 3 inch stamp base that you also have in your kit, and I trace the outline in order to give myself a proper frame. Then I'm just going to start sketching. You can do whatever you want on your stamp, really truly. I ended up just going with the floral design because those are pretty quick and simple for me to design, and I think they're very pretty. I have a nice small collection of hand-carved flower stamps, so I figured I'd just add to that. What you're watching here is just a sketch process, so I'm keeping it real rough and loose and just playing around with my design. My finished product will not actually look identical to my sketch, and that's a-okay. I figure sketching is just a way to get your ideas out, to get things kind of roughed in. This would probably be called a thumbnail by some people, and that is a rough approximation of what I'll do in my final. Now let me just say, if you take in only one bit of information from this tutorial, let it be what I'm about to say next. You need to carve backwards in order to print forwards. I'm illustrating this right now with what I'm sketching. If you have letters, numbers, countries, anything that has a right side and a left side and it needs to come out in the correct orientation in order to be understood, you are going to need to carve that into your stamp backwards. When you print it, it will flip, or when you stamp it, it will flip. So I have an example here with this lowercase e. You want to do it backwards to have it print forwards. So if I'm going to do any letters, initials, numbers, countries, anatomy, that's like kind of the big four that have a particular right side and left side that you need to keep on top of. Those things all need to be designed backwards in order to show up correctly on your final design. I don't actually use any letters in my final design personally, but I just want you to know this bit of information because there's nothing more frustrating than finishing a beautiful stamp and realizing that the monogram you put in the middle is going the wrong way. So now you'll see me sketching directly onto the linoleum, and you'll actually see me erasing on the linoleum as well. Linoleum is great. It's easy to draw on. I usually just use a pencil. If you find that your pencil is smearing, you can also use a Sharpie. I will actually often go back through with a permanent marker and bolden up my lines so that it's a little bit easier for me to see what I'm going to carve. You can see my design is shifting a little bit, kind of changing. I'll even erase some of these bits as I go. I end up simplifying the thing overall. So instead of having like 4 leaves, I end up with just 2. And instead of having other flowers in the background, I end up just making sort of an abstract sunset or landscape design. So please feel free, no matter what your sketch is, to shift and adjust as you go. Now what you'll see me doing here is I'm adding in some darker layers. What I'm giving myself are some indicators for what I am going to carve away and what I'm going to leave intact. It's important to think in these terms of what am I removing and what am I leaving. That is the way you need to think when you are working on a relief printing project, and stamping is a form of relief printing. Whatever you remove, whatever you carve away, that will end up being recessed or lowered from the surface of the linoleum. It will not then make any contact with your ink. Everything that you leave intact, that is what is going to make contact with your ink. So you can think about it this way. If I use my carving tool, which I will demonstrate in just a moment, to remove linoleum, those are the lines that are going to come out light or white. The things that I do not touch with the carving tool that stay intact, those will come out dark or black. Now let's look at the carving tool. What I'm showing here is actually what the blade looks like. You can see there's a flat layer and then a little U shape. This is considered a safety blade. The flat layer is going to keep your tool from digging too deeply into the linoleum and will also protect you from getting cut. The little U part, just that tiny little gouge, that is what we use to actually remove the linoleum. Now you saw there, if you screw back the ferrule, and ferrule is that silver part, you screw that off and you loosen it, you can actually pop the blade out. Then the blade fits back into the little half circle shape. You can tighten it back down and it will hold back in place. You shouldn't have to take your blade in and out, really, unless you get really into this and you want to buy more blades. So you can get different shapes of blades that do slightly different things. You can get V gouges and U gouges, and if you enjoy that, go out and purchase those for yourselves, and then you can play around with using this tool with different blade attachments. For now, we're just using a safety blade, and I'm actually going to show you most specifically what not to do while you're carving in order to keep yourself safe. This is not a very dangerous process, but it is a blade. It is quite sharp, and you can cut yourself. So on the screen, we're seeing what not to do right now. Just now, you watched me holding the block with my left hand while carving with my right. But what you'll have noticed is that my left hand was directly in the path of the blade, meaning that if for some reason the blade were to skip or jump, or I would put too much force and it would just cut too far, it would go directly into my hand. Now this is a safety blade. It's designed with safety in mind. The only actual sharp part of it is the U portion, that little divot. The rest of it is blunt and flat. So chances of you cutting yourself, even if you have your hand directly in line with the blade, it's pretty low. But you want to develop good habits. If you like doing this, you can do a lot more carving and you can use a lot sharper blades. So please develop good habits right from the start and make sure you are holding away from the cutting edge of the blade. You'll see now that I have my hand on the back of the block and I'm carving away from my hand. Now this is a handy little trick if you're having trouble kind of figuring out what you are leaving light and what is going to become dark. I am just using the side of a pencil and very lightly scrubbing over the top of the carved marks I've already made. The pencil's only going to make dark marks where the linoleum is still raised up, it's still intact. That gives me a better idea of what my actual stamping surface is going to look like. Once you're starting to feel fairly comfortable with it, you just got to keep going. Got to get all of that stuff carved out. I'm a big fan of carving away quite a bit and just leaving a small amount intact. But you can also carve away a very small amount and leave a large amount of it black. It's entirely up to you. But you'll see there with the way that I use the graphite from the pencil, I now have a darker layer. And as I carve away, it's even easier for me to see what is going to be light and what is going to be dark. Now I'm just going to stop talking for a bit because I think it's kind of self-explanatory. Hopefully you enjoy watching the little video. I'll come back in a few minutes to talk about stamping, but for now, let's just finish carving. And now it's time to stamp. So let's talk about paper. You have a few very small pieces of paper in your kit, and at first you might have been like, what on earth are these? They just look like scraps. And they are, but they're scraps of nice paper. I cut up all of my scraps of rice paper, which is Asian, Chinese or Japanese papers, as well as some other just machine printmaking papers, and I cut them into smaller chunks so that hopefully you can enjoy the experience of stamping on a nicer paper. That being said, stamps work great on things like printer paper or even craft paper. You should have an envelope that everything came in for your kit. If you need to use a practice paper, I'd recommend using that. Or you can take the printed instructions that you were in your kit and you can print on the back of that. For me, I'm just using a regular old piece of printer paper here just to do some test prints. This is called proofing. So I am stamping with my stamp and I'm not worrying so much about getting a perfect stamp. I'm just proofing. I'm proving to myself that it looks the way I want it to. So when I'm using this stamp block, this ink pad, I'm going to first push down kind of hard and then I move it around very lightly over the surface. I found that this is the best kind of combo of moves to get a nice coverage of ink. And then, like I said, these first 4 that I'm going to do, they're just proofs. They're just practice. I'm just taking a look at my block. I'm not even done carving yet. I actually wasn't sure when I was doing my proofing if I was happy with it or if I wanted to carve more. And after proofing, I realized I did want to carve more. So it's very important for you as an artist, as you're stamping, to check your work as you go. So take a moment, stamp, and see if you like it. Maybe you love it and you're ready to stop, or maybe you're like me and you realize there's a little more work to be done. So when I look at these proofs that I've done, I'm getting some great information out of it. That you can see there's the lines that are in the back there, the faint white lines. That's just coming from the fact that I had a stack of other papers underneath it. So I just know I need a smoother printing surface. But if I look at that third one in there, I've got pretty good coverage. I'm not worrying too much about my saltiness, which is all those little white specks. So I'm actually in pretty good shape, but I need a flatter printing surface. And I've decided, just because of the design changes that I want to do, I'm going to carve more away. So I have some nicer paper here. This is some of that rice paper, like I mentioned. I'm taking my time to really ink up the block well, and look at that nice even coverage of that black ink. I can see an even shine to it. So I'm ready to go and get it onto the paper. I'm going to start by pressing very evenly all over the back of the surface, just with my fingertips, and this works just fine. But you can also use other tools to assist you if needed. I will sometimes take a piece of plexiglass and put that on the back, and then just put an even pressure. Or in a moment, you will see me come back with a rolling pin. A rolling pin can be really handy for this, but you do need to be very careful. If you push too hard or too aggressively with the rolling pin, your stamp will stutter and you won't get a good impression. Now, I know a lot of you are probably looking to use this stamp less formally. Here, I'm really showing you how to print with this stamp, as treating the stamp as a work of art in its own right. But you can also just play around and stamp however you're used to stamping on whatever surface you want to stamp. So after doing those proofs, I definitely wanted to carve more away, and you can see this is the finished result. I took a lot more off the corners. I actually even used a box cutter to cut the corners clean off, because I was having some trouble with the corners constantly turning up in my stamping. So you can get real, aggressive with removal if you want. If you have something like a box cutter, please be safe. Don't ever cut towards yourself. But you can really mark up and knock up this block however you want in order to get the correct result for whatever your goal is. Now I'm just going to stamp this one on some rice paper once more, and I'm going to stamp it right in the middle. I'm trying to get a nice clean impression, because I'm treating this again like sort of a piece of art in its own right. I don't necessarily need to stamp something else to make it valid. I'm just going to let the stamp be its own thing of beauty. I'm pressing evenly on the back, and moment of truth. Oh my gosh. Look at that. Oh, I'm so happy with it. I thought it came out really, really beautiful. It's just a simple little California poppy was my inspiration, and it's printing really nice. I have the flower, a couple of slightly abstracted leaf, and this very simple background. We're going to get a few beauty shots now, and let me just take this time to say thank you. Thank you so much for spending time with me this afternoon or morning or whatever time it is for you. Thank you for doing this kit, and thank you for taking classes at the library. I really love running these programs. I love putting these kits together, and I'm just hope that folks out there are enjoying the materials and the lessons that they're getting from them. I hope you're happy with your work, and even if you're not, I hope you had fun working on it. If you want to share it with me, I'm going to have my information on the screen right now. You can find me on Instagram. Please feel free to DM me or to tag me. I would love to see the work that you're doing. That's probably the hardest thing about doing these video lessons, is I don't get to see anyone working in person. So I'm going to let you go here, but thank you so much, everyone. I hope you had a good time, and I hope you keep stamping more in the future. Good luck with all your art making, and I hope to see you in person soon.